maybe people are sort of right about this game being lackluster. Being one of the worst Tetris games out there is sort of an overstatement. There are obviously worse Tetris games out there, at least that's what I believe, right? Right? Boy, was I so wrong. 2 years ago, on November 28th, 2021, I took a look at Tetris World, and from what it looks like, I haven't reviewed another Tetris game since. But as you all know, while Tetris is one of the most simple games out there, it should also be worth noting that it's one of the most iconic video games to this date, spawning things such as board games, candies, skateboard decks, mugs, even getting a feature-length film last year exclusively on Apple TV Plus for some godforsaken reason. With that in mind, Tetris is not only one of the longest running video game franchises out there, but has also spawned over 200 different versions of the same game. How you do that is beyond me, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. I'm in awe at how many times you can make the same game with both major and minor gameplay tweaks for each version. But for every Tetris effect, or Puyo Puyo Tetris, there's gonna be a Faces Tris 3, so with that said, I've compiled some of the strangest official Tetris games out there, and I'm not going to take a deep dive into stuff like Tetris N9, Dr. Mario Tetris, or Tetris Attack. I'm talking about games that I found and thought to myself, wow, I can't believe this exists. So with that said, let's get into the list, starting with 1989's Weltris. Deemed as the official and also canon sequel to the original 1985 Tetris game, Weltris is a very strange game, not just in concept, but because of how it controls. I guess it was because it was made for older hardware and I didn't realize it until now, so oopsie daisy me. Weltris was released in 1989 for all these consoles, but for the sake of this video, I'll be taking a look at the Commodore 64 version of the game. What's cool about this game is that it was the first three-dimensional Tetris game to be made as far as I'm aware. Well, technically. Except the 3D part is when the pieces are falling, then they become 2D when they reach the bottom. Technically speaking, it may still be a 2D game, but you can't lie that it's a little bit impressive that they got 3D working with this game, with this console. As this is a Tetris game, to get line clears in this game, you have to clear out a line that's horizontal or vertical, depending on where the pieces go. Once you can't fit any more blocks, in this case, when the blocks reach the edge of the well, as the game calls it, that side is blocked off temporarily, but after a couple of blocks have fallen, the side is opened back up. Once all 4 sides are blocked off, it's game over. I honestly don't know what it was about this game, but I guess I just couldn't get into it. I think Tetris works in certain areas, whereas one tidbit of it sparks joy, some others don't necessarily spark enjoyment for me. Overall, while the game does lack polish and quality, it did provide one thing, being the first official top-down Tetris game, which probably didn't work out in the long run, but don't worry, most of the other games aren't like this game. Do you remember the Virtual Boy? I sure do. It was a commercial flop. But in all honesty, I'd really love a Tetris game to go with my nausea-inducing console from the mid-90s. Luckily, there were 2 Tetris games that were released on the console, one being 3D Tetris, which was released exclusively in North America in March of 1996 and featured cunty Tetris pieces for some reason. But exclusively in Japan, V-Tetris was released in August of 1995. As for the game itself, it has 3 modes, and that's pretty much it. This is as basic as Tetris gets. I'll be real and say that the game C, which allows the player to rotate the board, is kinda cool. Emphasis on kinda, because this game is kinda mid. Game A and B are essentially the same. The music's repetitive, and for a console all about stereoscopic 3D gaming, there sure is a lack of stereoscopic 3D, for better or for worse. I guess it's probably because of console limitations, but the game is extremely lacking. Unlike 3D Tetris, which actually utilizes 3D, has more character with cunty Tetris pieces, better music, and not to mention the fact that the pieces actually drop down from a top-down view. My theory is that the developers want to create a version of Tetris that just wouldn't cause too much strain or nausea, but then that just misses the entire point of the Virtual Boy as a whole. V-Tetris is not a good version of Tetris, and I wish it could have been better. It kinda makes me glad that we didn't get this game in America, for better or for worse. But you wanna know a good version of Tetris that never released in America? After the flop that was the Virtual Boy, we move on to Nintendo's next big console, the Nintendo 64. What makes this more unique and more strange? Have you ever wanted to track your heart rate through fucking Tetris? Which you can do! Tetris 64 may seem like any other Tetris game, but after realizing it comes with a heart rate monitor, it gets really weird to think about. And I'll be honest, I'm all for it. This, my friends, is known as the biosensor, exclusive to this game and this game only. Why? I don't know. Stick this thing into your filthy ear and the biosensor will track your heart rate and will change the game depending on how fast your heart rate is going. And that's where Bio Tetris comes in, literally nothing else. That's it. Other than that, it's just Tetris, no bells and whistles there. You have regular Tetris and Giga Tetris, where larger Tetraminos will fall, but will drop remnants as you clear more lines, and that's pretty much it for this game. Funnily enough, the game never released in America, but released in Japan in 1998. What's funny about that, though, is that all the text is in English, despite only being released in Japan, so my assumption was that the game was going to be released in America, but just never ended up happening? Huh? Oh yeah, it's a fine version of Tetris, I guess. Nothing too groundbreaking, I guess. Can we move on? Moving away from Nintendo consoles all the way to Sega consoles, next up on the list is Sega Tetris. Not the elusive yet illegal Genesis version that was recalled then re-released on the Genesis Mini in 2019. I'm talking about the Dreamcast version of Sega Tetris. Sega Tetris for the Dreamcast was exclusively released in Japan in 2000. However, for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna refer to it as Tetris Cast. Get it? Because Dreamcast and Tetris Cast? I'm just gonna call it Tetris Cast, you know, because Tetris Cast, you know? Fuck me, that name is awful. That will never catch on. Sega Tetris is a weird game, I'll give it that. Which one's my favorite of these cast of creatures though? I like the monkey a lot. They're so silly, which is something I would say, being honest, if it weren't for how uncanny all the character models are in this game. Jesus Christ. Anyways, Tetris Cast is a game that exists on the Dreamcast. Do I care for it? No. I will say though, playing through this game is so much more different from other Tetris games. It picks up speed instantly after like 30 lines or so. It's untranslated since it was only released in Japan, and overall it's just not fun to play. Maybe it's because I can't read Japanese though. Maybe I was playing on a higher difficulty option and I didn't know before then. But what are you gonna do about an untranslated game from 24 years ago, am I right? As you all know, Pokemon is one of the most popular games out there. Tetris may be the second highest selling video game series, but behind it is the Pokemon series. Starting out in 1996 for the Game Boy, the series had spanned upon every major Nintendo platform, has had multiple tournaments, multiple stores, a mobile app, and over 1,000 different Pokemon altogether. Oh yeah, and also this thing. The Pokemon Mini Console being released initially in Japan in 2001 and only having 10 games being released for the console. Only 4 were ever released in North America, but in Japan, there were all 10 games there. The games that were released exclusively in Japan were Pokemon Breeder Mini, Togepi's Great Adventure, Pichu Bros Mini, Pokemon Race Mini, and Pokemon Puzzle Collection Volume 2. Tetris was also released on the short-lived Pokemon Mini Console, but unlike the aforementioned games, this one was the only one to release in both Japan and the PAL region in 2002. It would have actually been released in America, even having an ESRB rating while being titled Pokemon Mini Shock Tetris. Unfortunately, that never happened due to, actually, I don't even know why that happened. They just went out back and put that shit down. Holy shit. As for the actual game, it's standard Tetris, but Gang of Tetris allows you to catch Pokemon. So get to stacking. 20 Lines is back, Pentaminos are back. It's just Tetris but with a Pokemon skin. There's a bit you can do with this, but I'll be real, I'm not into catching every Pokemon in a game. Call me a pansy all you want, but there's a reason I don't care for Pokemon after being the main game. And now, the last game for today. But I actually have a question. Do you remember the Nintendo DS? In 2006, Nintendo and the Tetris company created Tetris DS, filled with tributes to Nintendo's NES days, featuring various puzzle modes, a pretty nifty aesthetic, and overall pretty good music. What isn't known is that in 2004, another version of Tetris DS was being worked on that was going to be published by THQ and would have been the version we'd gotten if it weren't for the version developed by Nintendo. Tetris DS was a prototype worked on by TOS, who you might know for games such as the Game & Watch Gallery series, which I'll admit, I actually really love. They're fun little novelty games that you can pick up and play anytime, which is nice honestly. Anyways, back to Tetris DS, which was developed by TOS in 2004, and interestingly enough, for a prototype, it's really cool that this looks almost like a finished product. It could have been worth releasing. What was the problem? Oh, so that's how they get ya. For being almost complete, the game seems really good, but I can't help but feel that maybe somehow, in some way, this struck a nerve in someone. The Tetris company chose the Nintendo version over this pretty decent game. Well, I wouldn't really call it decent. When pieces are dropped, they're immediately placed. The game is severely empty with no cool things, which, I'll be real, for a DS prototype made in 2004, I can see why Tetris went with the Nintendo version. Both are aesthetically really good, but I guess Nintendo's Tetris DS would catch on to consumers more. All in all, this is just a cool version of Tetris, featuring pretty cool modes that I didn't think were ever seen again, and the goddamn rank system, goddamn it. I guess maybe it was for the best that we didn't get this game, but on the other hand, this has to be one of the most interesting Tetris games I've ever seen, or even heard of for that matter. But honestly, that's really the beauty of Tetris and why I love Tetris so much. You know, for every V-Tetris or Tetris cast, there's gonna be a good Tetris game, and today's selection of Tetris games were just a portion of the games in the vast sea of the now over, how many ever Tetris games there are in the world. Since then, there's been a lot more cool stuff that has happened with Tetris. Puyo Puyo Tetris, Tetris Effect, the re-release of the original Tetris Game Boy game on Nintendo Switch Online, a 13-year-old being able to beat the original Tetris on NES, not to mention you're now able to play Tetris on a goddamn McDonald's chicken nugget. Also, I'm adding this last minute into the script because 7-Eleven has also partnered with Tetris to make Tetris stuff as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Tetris is probably one of the most revolutionary games of all time. It may be basic, but this simple game was able to spread its wings long ago and became one of the most highest selling games on the market, and that's really saying something. I love Tetris. I will always love Tetris, and looking at the weirdest Tetris releases of all time makes me appreciate it even more. But there's still more weird Tetris titles I haven't looked at yet. Tetris CDI, which somehow features a beautiful soundtrack, the Facebook Tetris games, Bop It Tetris, the GBA version of Tetris Worlds, Tetris Giant, a giant Tetris arcade cabinet featuring really catchy music that I should really play one of these days. God, the amount of Tetris content there is, it really makes you think that maybe, somewhere out there, someone's making Tetris run on bacteria. What? They did it with Doom, so what's the problem with getting Tetris to run on E. coli? Sick of this shit. I swear, I just wanted to try and make this all sappy, but no!